Jan Tinklenberg, also known as Jan Tink. Welcome to my YouTube channel and blog. Today I'm going to show you my process for doing no-line coloring with Prismacolor pencils. This has been a technique that's been around for a long time. A lot of people used to call it gray guiding, and it was done with very light gray ink. We have other inks we use for this now. And so I'm going to show you my process. I haven't really watched any videos for other people's processes, so this is just how I do it. As usual, I've listed all of the supplies I've used in my description so that you can find the supplies you'll need. To do this technique, I'm going to use sorted Prismacolor pencils, and I'll be giving you the numbers for the colors that I use. The Jingle All the Way stamp set from MFT, and this Simon Says Stamps Barely Beige ink. A lot of people used to use distress ink in the antique linen, but as you can see by looking at these two swatches, as I try to grimly pick these up, the Barely Beige is so much lighter than the antique linen that most people are going. Plus, it's very Copic friendly, so most people prefer this now. Now I'm going to quickly stamp the images using the Barely Beige ink in my MISTI, which will allow me to make sure that all the lines are there. Because once you start coloring, those lines disappear pretty quick, so you want a really good image. Alright, now I'm going to quickly, well, I'm not doing that this quickly, I sped it way up, but I am going to put in my reds. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to keep this in the center of the screen, but I get excited while I'm coloring and I just keep moving it down, and then I remember, oops, time to move it back up. I like to use my dark colors first and put in my shadows, and then I blend from light to mid-tone. Usually use at least three colors of red or whatever color I'm using to blend in. I think I added a darker purple to just do the edges a little darker, because usually I will do my color range, then later on I'll touch up if I decide something's needs to be a little darker, like I'm doing here. And I keep adjusting this all the way through coloring the images just so that I get a nice dimensional look. And as I've said before, I tend to apply my color a lot heavier, and I sometimes will use, like I'm using here, a white color to blend and add a little highlight. Now I'm going to do the flesh tones, and I like this Nectar, which is the 1092, to do the base and the shadows of the colors. And I forgot about his little legs being red, so I had to go back. And so I'll put my colors in, and I'll also do something really important, is to get those eyes in there right away. Now, as you can see, I've got two kinds of Tombow mono erasers that I like to use when I'm coloring, and they are really good for colored pencils, and they help clean up any of the stray marks you might get. The thing is that little crumbs keep falling off your pencils all the while you're working, and if you try brushing them away with your hand, a lot of times you'll make little marks on the cardstock, and that's what those erasers are really good at cleaning up. And I'm putting the hands, and those were the most difficult part in doing this particular image, was his hands, and I didn't think till later on that I probably should have given him gloves, because it probably would have looked better, but hindsight. Alright, now I'm doing the beard and the hat shadows for the white parts, and I like to use a violet as my shadows, because if you ever look at snow, at the shadows on snow, they're almost always like a violet or a blue color, and so usually when I'm shading something white, I'll use a violet. And now I'm doing the present. And I colored this a really dark green, which I didn't end up liking, and I tried to lighten it up. And here you see I'm referring to the image to try to see where the fingers go, because they got lost pretty quick. So you need to have something to refer to when you're doing that. Okay, we're going back to the reds to do the bow on the package. And later on I tried to lighten up the present a little bit just because it was so very dark. Alright. And then I'm just cleaning up some areas with my erasers. I just showed you my drafting brush, which I find essential. It's really good for brushing away stray particles, because it doesn't tend to mark your cardstock the way that if you do it with your hand does. Okay, now I'm doing the face on the little girl using the same colors I use for Santa's face. I like to make the lightest part around the eyes and the nose and the mouth, just because that's where it takes your eye when you look at the face. And now I'm doing her hair, and I wanted her to be kind of a brunette with blonde highlights, so those are the colors that I used. And as you can see, I'm doing the same thing, using the darker colors, shading in, blending. Okay, for her dress I decided to use a aqua blue teal color, just because, you know, I get tired of red and green and I wanted something pretty, and that's my favorite color, so there, yeah, that's my reason I'm sticking to it. And those are the colors I used. And I'm touching her face back up just because it looked a little flat to me, and I will usually just, like, at the very end, just go back in, put more black for the eyes. Looking back, I probably would have put the eyes in with a, I'm adding some white highlights with a gel pen. Anyway, the black eyes, I probably could have done that with a Copic fine liner, just so that they didn't smear every time I colored the flesh colors around. Okay, now I'm putting the shadows in with my violet pencil, and that's the grade violet that I used earlier. And adding a little more around the beard, just to add a little more shade. And I can tone it back down with a white pencil. That's the nice thing about having those. It's kind of like a blending pencil, except not. If you're doing the heavy application of pigment that I do. I know other crafters don't do that, but I do. Alright, now I'm going to look and see if I missed any spots, because usually there's little tiny spots where you can see that you didn't really color. And I'm adding a little bit of white highlight to the little hair ties that she has. And cleaning up and adding a little more shade. And that looks good. Okay, I'm going to finish the card. I'm going to use some My Favorite Things paper. This is the dots and stripes in the blue and the green. I've got everything listed in my description below that you can find all of these things that I'm using. And I decided I didn't like the polka dots so much. So I flipped through, and that was too dark. Didn't like that. And that was perfect. That's what I decided to use. Okay, I'm going to die cut this out with the wonky stitched rectangles from My Favorite Things. And I'm going to use the rectangle from Blueprints 13 to cut my striped paper out. I want it to be precise because I'm OCD that way, so I want it to be exactly in the center, so I use a little piece of artist tape there to keep it from moving. Okay, I decided to use one of the greetings from the set, and so I've got some Simon Says Stamps Lipstick Red, which is my favorite red. It's really bright, really nice. I buy that, a lot of it. And I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx Black to stamp that because it's a really nice dark black. And I'm using one of these stitched sentiment strips from My Favorite Things to cut that out. And we'll go back through the big shot. Alright, I'm going to decide where I want to put the greeting. I decided I liked it up at the top. And I have a piece of Neenah Solar White, 110 pound. I'm going to add my paper to the front, and I'm using some Kokuyo adhesive for that because it's really good. And then I've got some white fun foam, which is my favorite dimension thing now to use since I learned that from Jennifer McGuire. And I will use some Tombow Extreme adhesive to adhere the main image to the fun foam because it works really well with it. And I will do the same thing when I adhere it to the card front. And put that right in the center. And I'm going to add a little bit of foam to the edge just so that it has something to rest on when it's sticking over the edge of that one piece, because otherwise there's no support there. And I decided against the Christmas assortment after I played with them for a while, and so I went with the gold. And I decided, at first I thought I would put them there, but then I decided they didn't look quite right there. I didn't like them there, so I moved them again because I wanted a visual triangle, and that's where I felt it was. I needed to anchor it. So there's a visual triangle like that. All right, there's my other card I made. Thank you for watching this. Hope you enjoyed it, and indicate to YouTube that you liked it by clicking on the thumbs up. You can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already by clicking on the end card, and also go to my website by clicking on my face. Thanks, and see you next time.